Good Ceann Comhairle, and I'm glad to speak on behalf of Labour in support of this bill. And I'm conscious that it's the third time in 2 days that we've had the opportunity to have a substantive debate on climate and climate-related issues, and I think it's a sign of the times and how pressing and urgent this issue is. In today's earlier debate, I spoke, as many did, about the IPCC report, about the warning that we are at a code red for humanity, and about the crisis not only for our climate, but for our biodiversity, with the announcement just yesterday by the US government that 23 species would be declared extinct. And we know that this is as a result of human activity and human behaviour. And we know that there is a need for urgent action and a common purpose internationally to tackle climate change, just as we've seen that international common purpose in tackling the COVID pandemic. So it's a matter of harnessing the same commitment and the same solidarity, Minister, and I hope we can bring a measure of that. In yesterday's debate on data centres, which sought in fact only a pause as an interim measure, a pause while upon the development of data centres, while we sought for the government to conduct a review of their impact, of the environmental and economic impact of the centres, and of the context in which they're to be developed. And I think that was a sensible approach to take, and we in Labour supported that. And we spoke yesterday of the need for the government to provide clarity as to the strategy for the development of data centres, and in particular the strategy as to how to deal with the increased demand for energy that development of data centres would inevitably bring about. The question is how to power data centres. Can they be powered entirely from renewable sources? If that's the case, that's very welcome. And I listened to earlier speakers talking about how technology has moved on, and there's no doubt about that. And I know that the data centres that are being developed now are more energy efficient than those that were developed in the past. And again, there's no doubt about that. You know, as I said yesterday, as the proposers of the motion said yesterday, no, we're not against data centres. We understand and acknowledge their huge importance for our economy, for jobs, for us. You know, this is how we live now, and we can't roll that back. In my own constituency in Dublin Bay South, we have a huge amount of tech investment in the community as well as in different employers. So I think we're all very much conscious of that. But at the same time, we need to see regulation of data centres. We need to see a coherent and clear plan in the present tense, not in the future, but to see what the government are proposing to do now to regulate data centres. What are we proposing at national level to ensure that they are carbon neutral, or indeed that the increased demand on energy is going to come from renewable sources? But also, what are we doing at EU level? And I'm sorry I didn't get the chance to say this yesterday, and something that's really struck me much more just on reflection is how absent EU-level regulation of data centres is. This is an international issue. If data centres aren't built in Ireland, they're going to be built somewhere else. It's a global climate emergency. It's not just an emergency that we face here in Ireland. So we do need to have a transnational and EU-wide strategy, and indeed an international strategy on how data centres are to be developed, not just in terms of the huge demand they make on energy, and we listed the enormous demand yesterday, and we have those figures from EirGrid, but also the demand they make on water supply in Ireland as elsewhere. So these are huge issues, Minister, that we do need to see addressed, and we need, as I say, clarity from government before I think we could proceed any further. And I think that was the very sensible rationale behind the call for a temporary pause as an interim measure. And indeed, we supported the motion last night, as we support today's bill. I'm also grateful to Friends of the Earth for outlining a number of concerns that I think would be addressed through legislation of this sort, and that's why, again, we're supporting it. I think there's been a good deal of talk about the immediate term pressures on the electricity system in Ireland, particularly relating to, as we know, the 2 gas plants that have been out of action. But we have real concerns that comments recently from both government and the CRU indicate that we'll still be reliant on gas generation in the longer term, particularly with the increased demand from data centres, and that this, of course, will impede our ability to meet our ambitious but necessary climate targets in terms of emissions. So, you know, it's questionable whether we can say that new carbon budgets and sectoral emission ceilings will be sufficient to prevent excessive demands for energy that will force us to fall back on fossil fuel reliance again. And I think that's the crucial question. The crucial question that we in the opposition are asking is, how can we see any rollout of data centres without that falling back on reliance on fossil fuels? How can we be assured that the increased demand will be driven by renewable sources? And we need to see regulation put in place to ensure that that is the case. And again, that's absent both nationally and at EU level. I suppose the final thing to say is that, you know, when we talk about investment in renewables, I think we're all conscious that there's huge amount still to be done here, that we need to see serious investment made in a whole suite of technologies. We see from Wind Energy Ireland an analysis that carbon pricing, storage and green hydrogen can eliminate the need for fossil fuels in electricity, and they've got some impressive and optimistic modelling about our ability to reach 85% renewable electricity by 2030 and 100% later in that decade. So that's doable. And again, the IPCC report does give hope that with serious and substantive and radical action and intervention, we can reverse effects of climate change, that we can deal with and tackle the climate emergency. And we can't lose sight of that hope and that optimism. And modelling from Wind Energy Ireland is indicative of that hope. But we need to see the government intervention that will actually give effect to those hopeful projections and that optimistic modelling. And I think, again, currently that's lacking. I know that we debated today the forthcoming Climate Action Plan. I know that we're having these debates in the weeks prior to the holding of COP26 in Glasgow. And we're all, again, hopeful that we will see that sort of concerted international action led by strong governments, led by strong governmental actions across different countries. I think we're all very hopeful of that. But at the moment, I think many of us feel that we're just in a vacuum, and what we lack is a coherent policy, a coherent plan, and a present tense statement of intent from the government as to what will be done to regulate the development of data centres, but also to ensure that we will meet our climate emissions targets, and indeed that we will be able to move to that really important development of renewable energy sources to replace our over-reliance on fossil fuels. So, Ceann Comhairle, thank you for letting me in. I know the procedures on a Thursday evening are somewhat different, and I'm grateful to you for giving me time to speak today on this important issue. Gurr magat.